We live in a time where people expect instant answers. If something terrible happens, the public wants a name, a motive, and an arrest, preferably all at once. But the justice system doesn't run on certainty. It runs on proof. In this case, investigators had suspicions long before they had probable cause. They had DNA long before it could point to a person. And they had a man in their sights long before the law allowed them to act. What followed wasn't hesitation. It was restraint. Because knowing who did it and proving it in court are two very different things. And when the answers finally came, they didn't arrive in the way most people expect. Not with a trial, not with every question answered. This is a story about that gap between what feels obvious, what can be proven, and what justice is sometimes forced to accept. Welcome to Criminally Curious Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Fleming. This episode contains graphic descriptions of sexual violence. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. I'm often asked, what got you into investigating cold cases? It's a valid question. After all, most people that spend the time, effort, and money to get licensed as a private investigator pay their bills chasing cheating spouses and looking into insurance claims. To be fair, I did that too, for a short while. But it wasn't fulfilling for me. That wasn't where my passion was and had little to do with my experience and background. For me, it was part of my transition from active duty to civilian life. I had an exciting and demanding career in the Marines, one that brought together a variety of knowledge and skills from fields like public safety, emergency management, law enforcement, firefighting, search and rescue, and forensic science. In the Marines, being well-rounded was a good thing because it made you stand out among your peers in the smallest of the main military branches. Most Marines wear multiple hats, and I was no exception. Outside of the military, however, it could make you a jack of all trades and master of none. I needed to select a direction I wanted to go and hone those skills through education and experience. But I needed inspiration. I found that inspiration through my small part in what turned out to be a very big case. Tonight, we'll revisit that case, which shook the University of Virginia and beyond. The disappearance and murder of UVA student Hannah Graham, and how that tragedy revealed that a serial predator was operating in Virginia. On the night of September 12, 2014, 18-year-old Hannah Elizabeth Graham, a second-year student at the University of Virginia, was out with friends in Charlottesville. Hannah, a straight-A student and talented athlete from Fairfax County, had a full life ahead of her. She studied global public health and was known for her sharp wit and infectious laugh. But sometime after midnight, things took a dark turn. Hannah's night started around 7 p.m. when she met with friends and fellow ski team members to socialize and get ready for a night on the town. Hannah began drinking at that get-together and continued to consume alcohol throughout the night. Hannah accompanied her fellow ski team members to Fig, a restaurant on the corner, across from the university. Around 11 p.m., Hannah and a friend from high school went to a college party at an apartment in town, but left shortly after she arrived to attend a different apartment party. Around midnight, Hannah said she wasn't feeling well and she wanted to go home. One of her friends walked her out, but Hannah turned down the offer to walk her home and left on her own. That was the last time Hannah's friends saw her alive. Hannah was exchanging text messages with her friends all night, including after leaving that party to walk home. In those messages, she indicated she had gotten lost along 14th Street, but she made it to the mall, a lively downtown area filled with restaurants, music, and students enjoying the early fall weekend. Surveillance footage captured Hannah walking alone through the downtown mall around 1 a.m. She appeared disoriented and intoxicated, and was continuing to text her friends, writing, "I got stuck down though," seeming to mean that she was lost downtown. That would be her final known communication. At around 1:06 a.m., surveillance footage showed a tall African-American man walking near her. At 1:08, he was seen entering a bar. Moments later, at 1:10, he appeared to follow Hannah up the sidewalk. By 1:20, cameras showed them walking together, his arm wrapped around her. Her gait was unsteady. His demeanor was calm. Then, they vanished from view. That was the last time anyone saw Hannah Graham alive. As hours passed and she didn't return home, her friends grew worried. By Sunday, a missing persons report had been filed. The community reacted immediately. Flyers, search parties, social media blasts. UVA students walked the downtown mall in pairs, following her steps, hoping for a clue. What had happened to Hannah Graham? The situation seemed all too familiar to the people of Charlottesville. As I watched this unfold on the nightly news, it was eerily familiar to me too. 5 years earlier, on a crisp fall evening, Saturday, October 17, 2009, I was in what would be my last year on active duty, assigned to the rifle ranges at Quantico, Virginia, and living in an RV during the week at the DEA training facility on a remote part of the base. Morgan Dana Harrington, a bright and outgoing 20-year-old student at Virginia Tech, traveled with some friends to Charlottesville to see Metallica in concert at the University of Virginia's John Paul Jones Arena, less than 100 miles away from me. Morgan loved live music. She was described by friends and family as vibrant, intelligent, and artistic, a young woman with big dreams and an even bigger heart. But somewhere between the arena lights and the roar of the crowd, Morgan disappeared. According to witness accounts, Morgan left her friends during the concert at about 8:30 p.m. to use the restroom. But instead of returning, she somehow ended up outside the arena. Surveillance footage later confirmed she had exited and was denied re-entry by security due to a venue policy, even though she had her ticket. Her friends did make contact with her by phone at 8:48 p.m. and learned what had happened, but Morgan told them she would get a ride. Her parents lived in Charlottesville, and she knew the area from growing up there, and she was due to spend the following day visiting them anyway. But Morgan didn't make it to her parents' house, and when they tried to reach her the next day to find out when she would arrive, Morgan didn't answer her phone or messages. They reached out to Morgan's friends, who went to the concert with her and learned what had happened. They immediately started to worry. Morgan was reported missing to Charlottesville police that very day. Morgan's final known movements were disturbing. Witnesses said she seemed intoxicated and described a small scrape on her chin from a fall that happened in the arena concourse. She had no cash on her since she had given her money to one of her friends to buy some concert merchandise. She stayed in the area of the arena for nearly an hour and was seen by several witnesses in the University Hall West parking area adjacent to the arena. She doesn't appear to have been with anyone in that hour, but there were other people nearby that were milling around the arena. Around 9:15 p.m., Morgan was seen in the Lanigan Field parking area near the track and had some interactions with people in that area. One of those people was exiting a taxi, and she remembered Morgan standing nearby. That witness commented on the unique Pantera t-shirt that Morgan wore to the concert that night. By 9:20 p.m., witnesses reported seeing a woman matching Morgan's description hitchhiking with her thumb out on nearby Copley Road Bridge, about a block south of Lanigan Field. The next morning, her purse was found by a lacrosse player in a parking lot near Lanigan Field, less than a quarter mile from the John Paul Jones Arena. Her purse contained her Virginia Tech student ID, her driver's license, and her debit card, along with an empty flask that Morgan had brought with her to drink alcohol from on the way to the concert. On Monday, October 19th, police recovered Morgan's cell phone from the University Hall West parking lot. The battery had been removed. The next day, they found the battery cover for her phone nearby. Her parents immediately feared foul play. The community held vigils. Flyers papered the town. But weeks turned into months, and no Morgan. Then, on January 26, 2010, 109 days after she vanished, a grim discovery shattered any remaining hope. A farmer in southern Albemarle County, about 10 miles from the arena, found skeletal remains in a remote hayfield on Anchorage Farm. The location was isolated, off Route 29, a stretch of highway that locals say has long carried a dark history. Forensics confirmed what everyone feared. The remains belonged to Morgan Harrington. Several articles of clothing and jewelry items were recovered, but Morgan's boots, leggings, a crystal necklace, and her underwear were not present. The condition of her body showed signs of a violent struggle. Morgan had a spiral fracture of her upper left arm, 2 green stick rib fractures, and a skull fracture that all occurred at or near the time of her death. Evidence also indicated that Morgan had been sexually assaulted. Dr. Kevin Whaley of the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Richmond determined the cause of death to be a homicidal violence of undetermined origin, and the manner of death was homicide. One thing appeared certain, though. Morgan fought back the very best that she could. The field where she was found bore no witnesses, no cameras, no immediate clues, just silence. Her killer had left her in a place he thought no one would ever find her. But Morgan was not forgotten. Her parents, Dan and Jill Harrington, became vocal advocates for campus safety and victim support, transforming their grief into action. They worked tirelessly to keep Morgan's story alive. At the time, there were no suspects, no arrests, no known leads, just questions. Who had picked Morgan up? Why had her phone been tampered with? And why had someone so full of life ended up alone in a field, discarded like a secret? The answers wouldn't come for years, but Morgan's story was far from over. On March 29, 2010, DNA evidence confirmed that a Pantera t-shirt with red stains that was found the previous November, almost a full month after Morgan disappeared, was indeed the shirt Morgan had been wearing at the Metallica concert. That shirt was found in front of a row of apartments on 15th Street Northwest near Grady Avenue in Charlottesville, spread out on some bushes in front of the apartments as if it was on display. The resident that found it confirmed it had not been there that morning. Besides the shirt not being located for a month, The location is also odd. Morgan was seen around the arena and Lanigan Field, which is west of the arena. But the location where her shirt was found is the opposite direction from the arena, east. In November 2010, more than a year after Morgan went missing, and about 10 months after her body was found, authorities announced that DNA collected from that t-shirt was a match to another unsolved case. At approximately 8:30 p.m. on Saturday, September 24, 2005, a 26-year-old woman, referred to only as RG in court documents, was walking home from a giant grocery store near Germantown Road in Fairfax City. She had stopped earlier at a Borders bookstore, lost track of time, and was returning to her townhouse on Rock Garden Drive, just a short walk away. As she neared her front walkway, she sensed someone behind her. A stocky African-American man with a beard and mustache, about 6 feet tall, approached and asked for an address. Feeling uneasy, she began to quicken her pace. Before she could reach her door, the man picked her up like a baby, dropped her on the curb, and dragged her into a grassy patch at the end of the parking area, laying her beside the sidewalk adjacent to a children's playground. He repeatedly dropped her and sat on her legs to pin her in place. He beat her, slamming her head into the ground, punching her face, choking her. During the assault, he threatened, "I will kill you if you scream again. Let me do this, and I'll let you go." He sexually assaulted her, choking her and covering her nose and mouth. She passed in and out of consciousness as she fought back. RG struggled fiercely, kicking, punching, and scratching the attacker. Minutes later, at about 8:45 p.m., headlights from a car briefly illuminated the area. A man named Mark Castro had pulled into the complex to watch a boxing match. He heard a faint cry, looked over, and saw RG, nude from the waist down, covered in mud and blood, barely conscious. Believing her nearly dead, he knocked on doors for help. The attacker had fled. Police arrived and RG was transported to the hospital. Nurses, specially trained in sexual assaults and collecting evidence, documented bruising around her neck and face, and they collected fingernail scrapings. A composite sketch was produced over 2 days, based on RG's cooperation with a sketch artist. She worked with the artist repeatedly, asking for redraws until the sketch resembled her attacker's eyes, forehead, and beard. Described as under 30, African American, with a mustache and beard. Investigators collected the sketch and circulated it in the local media. No immediate matches were found. Police considered dozens of suspects. Up to 40 were ruled out, and several DNA samples were tested against the fingernail scrapings where RG had scratched her assailant. None of them matched. There was speculation that the attacker might reside or work in Fairfax, but no concrete leads. The DNA evidence from RG's attack was entered into the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, but no matches could be made at the time. Despite their efforts, RG's case went unresolved for years. That is, until DNA collected from Morgan Harrington's t-shirt was entered in CODIS in November 2010. According to the FBI, the probability of a coincidental match between the samples from RG in 2005 and Morgan in 2010 were approximately 1 in 2.2 quadrillion. That means the chance of another individual other than the actual contributor having the same DNA profile was less than the population of the entire planet. In other words, there was no doubt that the person that assaulted RG was the same one that assaulted and murdered Morgan Harrington. Police investigating Morgan's murder updated the sketch from RG's attack and began circulating it again, showing the suspect with and without facial hair, along with a description. The suspect was described as an African American male with black hair and facial hair at the time of the Fairfax attack. He is approximately 6 feet tall and was believed to be between the ages of 25 and 35 years old in 2005. But who was he? Even with the DNA match proving that the same suspect that attacked RG in 2005 was the man that abducted and murdered Morgan in 2009, the case went mostly stagnant. In 2012, the FBI launched a multimedia campaign that included a public service announcement by Metallica lead guitarist James Hetfield asking the public to come forward with information in Morgan's case. The campaign also included digital billboards in Virginia, D.C., and 23 other states, social media outreach on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, a dedicated website, and the use of podcasts to spread news about Morgan's murder. But the case remained unsolved, and the identity of Morgan's murderer and the man responsible for the Fairfax assault was still unknown. One theory that came up was that RG and Morgan Harrington may have been new victims of the Route 29 stalker. The Route 29 stalker is the moniker given to the assailant in a number of suspicious and frightening events that took place along or very close to U.S. Highway 29 in Virginia. Law enforcement records recount first-person survivor accounts from more than a dozen women who reported being flagged down or harassed along Route 29. Most of them described nearly identical encounters. The stalker drove a pickup truck and got the woman's attention by flashing his lights or honking the horn. He would then offer help with a car problem, such as sparks under your car, to lure them out of the vehicle where he would attack. Some of those witnesses reported seeing a green tarp or a toolbox in the bed of his truck. These suspicious stops and abduction attempts occurred mainly during February and March of 1996 and seemed to stop after the disappearance of Alicia Reynolds on March 2, 1996. Alicia was driving alone on Route 29 from Baltimore to Charlottesville to visit family. She never arrived. Her car was found later, and her body was recovered about 15 miles away in Culpeper County in May of 1996. 8 of the survivors of the stalker later identified Darrell Rice as the man who approached them, and Rice was indicted in June 2004 for abducting a female motorist in early 1996 along Route 234. Rice was never charged in Alicia Reynolds' murder, however, and DNA testing later failed to link him to other related cases. He remains a suspect, but was never convicted in the crimes on Route 29. Richard Mark Ivanitz, a convicted serial killer that was active from 1996 to 2002 in Spotsylvania, Virginia, has long been suspected by some of being the Route 29 stalker. He murdered several teens in Virginia beginning in March 1996, but authorities never confirmed his involvement in the Route 29 cases, and no link was established before his suicide in June 2002. While the attack on RG and both Morgan's and Hannah's abductions occurred within blocks of Route 29, all 3 were pedestrians. Also, Rice was in custody and Ivanitz was deceased. Since DNA was used to rule out Rice and Alicia Reynolds' murder, it is safe to say the DNA obtained from RG's fingernails or Morgan's t-shirt were not a match to Reynolds either. Authorities soon got a break in Hannah's case, though, thanks to the surveillance videos and witness accounts from the downtown mall. 6 days after Hannah disappeared, investigators were able to identify the large African-American man seen with Hannah. His name was Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. Police located Matthew and searched his apartment on September 19, 2014, and they seized his car. Matthew asked to retrieve his passport from his car before they took it, and authorities denied the request. Police collected evidence as well, including a cigar butt with a wooden tip from Matthew's wallet and a pair of gym shorts found on the floor of his apartment. The next day, just before police could confirm to the media that Matthew was the man with Hannah in the videos, he walked into the Charlottesville police station with 2 relatives and said he wanted a lawyer. He didn't answer any questions or tell police anything, and with no evidence to hold him, Matthew was allowed to leave the police station. But officers followed him. He withdrew all but $30 from his account at an ATM and then went to his grandmother's house. The next day, September 20th, 2014, Matthew left in his sister's car, driving fast. The officers following him didn't have authority or cause to pursue him, though, and he got away. Just like that, the only suspect in Hannah Graham's disappearance vanished himself. While Jesse was on the lam, the investigators got a major break in Hannah's case. Inside Matthew's 1998 Chrysler Coupe, seized by police on September 19th, they found biological material that matched Hannah's DNA on the inside passenger side door of the vehicle. They also found Matthew's DNA. This finding, along with the surveillance videos and clothing seized from his apartment, was crucial in confirming physical contact with and transportation of Hannah by Jesse Matthew. On September 23, 2014, 10 days after Hannah Graham disappeared, Jesse Matthew was formally charged with abduction with intent to defile in connection to Hannah's disappearance. The following day, Matthew was apprehended while camped out on a beach near Gilchrist, Texas, after a woman recognized him from wanted posters that had been on the national news. Matthew was taken into custody and extradited back to Virginia, arriving at the Albemarle County Jail on September 27, 2014. On September 29th, police announced a major development in the case against Jesse Matthew. Matthew's DNA had been entered in CODIS. The results showed that Jesse Matthew was a match to DNA collected from Morgan Harrington's t-shirt and RG's fingernail scrapings. On October 1, 2014, Jesse Matthew, who remained in an isolated cell within the Albemarle County Jail, was formally charged in Fairfax County, Virginia, with abduction with the intent to defile and object sexual penetration for the 2005 sexual assault of RG in Fairfax. Prosecutors agreed to prosecute Matthew on the earliest case first, giving them more time to build cases against him for Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham. One question remained, though, and it became crucial to ensure Matthew would never be a free man again. Law enforcement and prosecutors hoped answering that question would lead to more evidence that would definitively link Matthew to what happened to Hannah. That question was, where was Hannah Graham? In September and early October 2014, I watched as all of this unfolded on the nightly news. I remembered following Morgan's case when I was working on Marine Corps Base Quantico in 2009 and 2010. I took the uniform off the summer of 2010, but stayed in the National Capital Region, finishing my master's degree and working in a similar capacity to my last position on active duty with the Chemical Biological Incident Response Force. Because of my background and training, I was also an active member in what is known as a VOAD, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disasters. I was trained and experienced in conducting search and rescue operations in hazardous environments, like those encountered after a disaster or a terrorist event. And the VOAD gave me a way to give back to the community. Jesse Matthew was in custody in the Albemarle County Jail, charged with abduction with the intent to defile Hannah Graham. But Hannah was still out there somewhere, and Chief Longo of the Charlottesville Police Department was desperate to find her and make sure Jesse Matthew would never see freedom. After Jesse Matthew was identified as a person of interest in Hannah's disappearance, police obtained a search warrant for his mobile phone records. Cell tower data showed that Matthew had traveled to many remote, rural areas around Charlottesville in the days after Hannah disappeared. It was far too much land area to search with the limited resources available to Chief Longo, so he reached out to the Virginia Emergency Management Agency looking for volunteers that were properly trained and experienced, could pass background checks, and be trustworthy working an active crime investigation to help. I was one that answered that call. I arrived in Charlottesville the week of October 13, 2014, with a team of 33 others, and we got right to work. We were brought up to speed on the investigation and what our role would be. It had been a month since Hannah had disappeared, and as upsetting as it is to say even now, the reality was that we were doing a recovery, not a rescue. We were likely looking for skeletal remains. We split into small teams of 6 to 8, were issued radios for communicating with the command post, and provided printed maps of the areas we were assigned to search. We would go out in the morning and search, return to the command post for lunch and advising law enforcement on what we had accomplished. Then we would get new instructions for the afternoon search. The detectives had mapped out the location data from Matthew's phone, and we had sites to look at in multiple counties. The first few locations that my team was assigned to were areas with farms and cow pastures, deep in the country. They all had small ponds or creeks on them, and were locations where Matthew's phone location data indicated he had been recently. Those first locations were fairly open, consisting of pasture land with some sparse scrub vegetation, but mostly open, not ideal locations, but places that still needed to be checked. We located and talked with property owners, and all of them were supportive and gave consent to search their property. Some even suggesting areas that were hidden or where they had chased off trespassers before. On the second day, we were assigned to some heavily wooded and remote areas. In one of those, we located a fairly large bone field with evidence of animal scavenging. After taking photos and sending them to the command post, I collected some of those findings in paper evidence bags while detectives made their way to our location. That afternoon, we were assigned a new area that was heavily forested and rugged. There were several abandoned structures on the large property, and we located what appeared to be a moonshining operation. For the second time, we had to call in and secure the scene until detectives arrived. On Saturday, October 18, 2014, we had several teams searching a large area that was sparsely populated with a mixture of hayfields and forest and some vacant structures. My team was searching deep into some woods down a dirt road, at least a mile from the main paved road. Another team was working the other side of that paved road, and a third team was working their way up a perpendicular road, and at times I could hear them through the woods on my right flank. We were just about done on our side when a car came down the dirt road towards us and stopped, a single male driver in the vehicle lowering his window. He looked angry. I approached the vehicle to explain what we were doing and see who he was. and possibly get consent and some ideas where we might look if he was a landowner. But this guy was not supportive or willing to let me talk at all. I wasted a few minutes trying to reason with him, then told him we would be leaving and he could expect a detective to come visit him. He said something smart and drove off as I picked up my radio to let the command post know what happened and that we were clear of our area and were moving to the next objective. Oddly, the command post didn't answer me, even though we had heard one of the other nearby teams talking to them just moments earlier. Instead of trying the radio again, I tried calling the command post, but I didn't have cell signal. We had to get back out on the paved road and go to a small church on a hill so I could call in. I was told to just go ahead and break away and return to the command post for lunch and new assignments. Something about that conversation was weird, and I soon learned why. That adjacent team that we had heard through the woods had made a chilling discovery. Off Old Lynchburg Road in southern Albemarle County, just over 10 miles from where Morgan Harrington's remains had been found years earlier, skeletal remains were located in a heavily wooded area behind an abandoned property, and the location was consistent with digital forensic mapping of Matthew's phone the day after Hannah vanished. The remains were confirmed to be those of Hannah Graham. Her remains were scattered, consistent with animal activity and exposure to the elements. Only partial remains could be recovered. Though investigators did not release all the details, they confirmed what her family had feared. Hannah had been murdered. Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. was born December 14, 1981, in Charlottesville, Virginia. He grew up in a religious household, the son of a traveling evangelist and preacher. His parents eventually separated, but appear to have remained involved in his life. In his teens, he came to be known as quiet, yet physically imposing. He excelled in football, playing as an offensive lineman during high school at Liberty Christian Academy, a private Christian school in Lynchburg, Virginia, founded in 1967 by Baptist preacher Jerry Falwell Sr. In 2000, Matthew enrolled at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, on a football scholarship. 2 years later, he transferred to Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia, but withdrew a year later without graduating. After leaving CNU, Matthew took on a series of low-level jobs, eventually moving to Fairfax County, Virginia in 2005. While no employer has been publicly named for Matthew's time in Fairfax, he appears to have worked jobs that allowed him to blend into the community. By 2007, Matthew was back in Charlottesville, working as a taxi driver until at least 2010. Around August 2012, Matthew was employed as a patient technician at the UVA Medical Center in Charlottesville, right downtown, just blocks from where Hannah was last seen walking on the pedestrian mall, with Matthew following close behind. Most people who follow true crime realize that in cases like these, the offender often goes through a period of learning through mistakes and escalation. The same appears to be true with Matthew. Although Matthew has never cooperated with law enforcement or actually confessed to his crimes, we do know that his criminal record was fairly innocuous prior to his arrest for the abduction of Hannah Graham. Obviously, that doesn't mean he had not committed any crimes, just that he had not yet been caught. Matthew had at least 2 accusations of sexual misconduct in his early adult life. In fact, the reason Matthew left both Liberty University and CNU was because he was accused of sexual assaults, one at each school. Rather than pursuing formal disciplinary or criminal actions against him, both universities allowed Matthew to quietly withdraw. Experts agree these incidents show an early pattern of sexual aggression, as well as institutional failure to act. He missed opportunities. It also allowed Matthew to enter society and the workforce without concern over failing a background check. While we can only speculate about what led Matthew to attack RG in Fairfax, the location does offer some theories. The area where Matthew encountered RG is in fairly close proximity to George Mason University and a number of medical clinics and nursing homes, both being part of his MO in Charlottesville. Further investigation revealed that Matthew had likely targeted Morgan after she exited the Metallica concert and became isolated. It is believed that he either lured or forced her into his vehicle from the Copley Road Bridge area. In 2009, Matthew was driving a 2004 Mercury van as a taxi in Charlottesville. Matthew's phone records, obtained after he was named a person of interest in Hannah Graham's 2014 abduction, indicated that he had spent a lot of time in the Charlottesville area in the hours prior to Morgan Harrington's disappearance. Following those leads, detectives located 4 witnesses that had taken cab rides to the John Paul Jones Arena on the night of the Metallica concert. Those witnesses gave descriptions of the cab they rode in and their driver, and those descriptions matched Jesse Matthew and his Mercury van. One of those witnesses told investigators that she saw a young blonde woman wearing a Black Pantera t-shirt standing just feet away from the cab when she got out, and that woman commented directly to her about her t-shirt. Detectives also talked to other cab drivers that worked Charlottesville the night of the Metallica concert, and they remembered Jesse working that night. One of them recalled that he had a hard time reaching Matthew for fares that night. Investigators also learned that between fares that night, the taxis hung out around Lanigan Field until their next job. Detectives also found a witness that used Matthew's taxi the night before Morgan disappeared. Matthew was driving this customer home when she told him she only had limited funds to pay for the ride. This witness was prepared to testify that Matthew asked if she would perform a sex act as payment, but she refused and gave him what cash she had and walked the rest of the way home. Matthew's phone records also showed that he had nearly an hour and a half of inactivity after 9:30 p.m. on the night Morgan Harrington disappeared, and then his movements around Charlottesville resumed and continued throughout the night. Dispatch records during that time period did not exist for Matthew, but they were present for other drivers during that time. When Matthew's cell phone activity resumed, it came off a sector of a tower in Charlottesville that was consistent with the general direction of Anchorage Farm, where Morgan's body was eventually found. Police believe that after she was lured or forced into Matthew's cab that night, she was taken to a secondary location where she was raped, assaulted, and murdered. Her body was then dumped at Anchorage Farm, about 10 miles away, and left exposed to the elements. By 2015, the case against Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. had evolved from suspicion to certainty. Thanks to forensic evidence, eyewitness accounts, and surveillance footage, prosecutors were now building a case against him not only for the abduction and murder of Hannah Graham, but also for the 2005 sexual assault in Fairfax and the 2009 rape and murder of Morgan Harrington. Each case was horrifying on its own. Together, they painted a picture of a serial predator, methodical, violent, and dangerously overlooked. Before either murder case went to trial, prosecutors pursued charges related to the 2005 rape in Fairfax, Virginia, where the victim had been dragged into the woods and sexually assaulted after leaving a grocery store. She survived, and her testimony, paired with the DNA match, helped secure a conviction. In June 2015, Jesse Matthew was convicted of attempted capital murder, abduction with intent to defile, and sexual assault in the Fairfax case. He was sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. That case alone could have kept Matthew behind bars for the rest of his life. But for the families of Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham, justice required something more: accountability for their daughters' deaths. In Charlottesville, prosecutors faced a critical decision. Taking Matthew to trial for the murders of Hannah and Morgan would mean prolonged media attention, painful testimony, and years of appeals. Though the evidence was strong, the cases relied heavily on forensic science and circumstantial timelines, and there was always the risk that a jury trial could result in a hung jury, or worse, a technical acquittal. Rather than risk it, prosecutors struck a deal. On March 2, 2016, Jesse Matthew pleaded guilty to the abduction, rape, and murder of both Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham. In exchange for his plea, the state agreed not to pursue the death penalty. Instead, Matthew was sentenced to 4 additional life sentences, 2 for each woman, on top of the 3 he was already serving for the Fairfax attack. The sentence ensured that Jesse Matthew will never walk free again. He will die in prison. For the families, the plea deal was bittersweet. Jill and Dan Harrington, Morgan's parents, said they accepted the plea because they did not want to risk the death penalty being overturned down the road. They didn't want to relive the trauma in court. They wanted finality. Hannah's parents expressed similar relief, calling the plea a way to spare us the agony of a trial and to begin healing. But justice, as any grieving parent will tell you, isn't the same as closure. Matthew never offered a confession. He never explained why he chose Morgan, or why he targeted Hannah, or if there were more. Jesse Matthew will spend the rest of his life behind bars, 7 life sentences with no possibility of parole. The legal system did what it could, but no sentence and no court can bring Morgan or Hannah home. Their families have turned their grief into action, supporting safety initiatives, scholarships, and advocacy for missing persons. Their daughters' names now represent strength and purpose, not just tragedy. Justice was served, but the story is still being written. Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham were young women with boundless potential, both taken too soon, both mourned deeply. But their families, devastated by loss, refused to let their stories end in darkness. Instead, they've worked tirelessly to ensure that Morgan and Hannah's names live on, not as victims, but as catalysts for change. After Morgan's murder, her parents, Dan and Jill Harrington, turned their grief into purpose. They founded the nonprofit Help Save the Next Girl, an organization dedicated to promoting personal safety, spreading awareness about predatory behavior, and empowering young people to protect themselves and others. The organization partners with schools, law enforcement, and community groups across the country. Their work includes educational programs on situational awareness, self-defense training for young women, nationwide alerts for missing persons, and support for families of the missing or murdered. Through Help Save the Next Girl, Morgan's light continues to shine, one presentation, one life lesson, one prevented tragedy at a time. Jill Harrington once said, "We may not have saved Morgan, but we can help save someone else's daughter." Hannah's parents, John and Sue Graham, have also turned unimaginable grief into lasting advocacy. In the years following Hannah's murder, they championed campus safety legislation in Virginia and beyond. Their efforts helped push for reforms in how universities handle missing student alerts, off-campus behavior, and collaboration with local law enforcement. Their advocacy helped raise awareness about the importance of real-time communication between campuses and local police, improved surveillance systems and lighting in high-risk areas, stricter protocols for reporting and investigating missing students, and counseling and victim support services on campus. In Hannah's memory, the University of Virginia established the Hannah Graham Memorial Fund, which supports scholarships and initiatives aimed at fostering a safer, more inclusive student environment. Both Morgan and Hannah's stories, tragic as they are, have resonated across the country. Their cases fueled national conversations about the risks women face on and near college campuses, the failures of institutions to recognize patterns of predatory behavior, the importance of tracking DNA evidence and solving cold cases, and how serial offenders often slip through the cracks for years. Jesse Matthew had a known history of sexual misconduct at 2 Virginia universities, yet he was never prosecuted or formally expelled. His pattern wasn't connected until it was too late. These oversights, gaps in accountability and reporting, have since been scrutinized and addressed in some school systems, thanks in part to the public attention driven by these cases. The names Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham now stand for more than sorrow. They represent resilience, reform, and a community that refused to stay silent. Morgan was an aspiring teacher. Hannah was a future global health advocate. They didn't get the chance to live out those dreams, but their legacies now save others because of their families, because of advocacy, because of you who keep telling their stories. If you want to support Morgan and Hannah's legacies, visit helpsavethenextgirl.org or contribute to the Hannah Graham Memorial Fund at the University of Virginia. And if you or someone you know feels unsafe on campus, speak up, ask for help, take care of one another. These stories remind us that vigilance is not fear, it's love in action. These stories remind us that even in the face of unthinkable loss, change is possible. Morgan, Hannah, we remember you, and we won't forget. This episode was researched and produced by Criminally Curious. For more about this and other cases, be sure to follow us on social media and consider subscribing to our Patreon site. Each month, we highlight a new case like this one, and we publish and discuss legal and investigative themes associated with that case throughout the month in posts, live videos on social media, and a monthly Q&A session for Patreon subscribers. If you have tips on unsolved cases, contact your local law enforcement agency, or you can send information confidentially to tips@criminallycurious.com. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay compassionate, and remember that what's done in darkness will eventually come to light.